Prestonwood Baptist Church's Christmas pageant is going viral. Flying angels, real camels, and zebras, the whole Vegas spectacular. We can use veiled class judgments like tacky, lacking gravitas, but all that does is reveal how some expressions of devotion are inherently less legitimate than high culture religious art. We can argue about whether religious extravagance honors God, but medieval and Renaissance extravagance in Christian art wasn't so humble either. The Pope commissioning Michelangelo while people starved is the same sin, but we have decided that European high culture equals holiness. The problem here isn't about religious extravagance because the incarnation is extravagant. God becoming flesh is the most over-the-top, excessive expression of love. The real question is, what does your extravagance reveal about who you're worshiping? What does your excess signify? Who and what does your God endorse? Let's talk about God's excess. God did not choose a palace birth announced to kings and priests. God chose a feeding trough in an occupied territory, announced to the people with the least religious and economic access. These are night shift shepherds whose work made them ritually unclean for the temple. The entire point of the Nativity is that God made salvation freely available to the people excluded by religious establishment. The over-the-top part of incarnation is that you didn't need credentials. You didn't need purity. You didn't need a credit card. You just needed to show up. This is how the organizer defends the spectacle.
It's designed that way as an outreach for people to come into the church. There are so many things that are competing for people's attention. And so for us to be able to do something that's over the top, that when people walk in and they see the awe and wonder.
It's outreach to attract people to the church. Let's translate that, shall we? We don't think the gospel is compelling enough given people's attention spans. We need flying angels, camels, and zebras to convince people that Jesus matters. We created a bar that people need to clear to access our prosperity gospel because we want to reach a particular group of people who can afford tickets to the show. That is not outreach. That is tax-free theater marketing. You've literally made a theme park out of God's free gift where the incarnation requires a credit card. The actual gospel reached tax collectors, sex workers, fishermen, the ritually unclean, people who couldn't afford the spectacle. The gospel was for the poor, people that your ticketing model systemically excludes. You know what the church's early outreach strategy was? Feeding people, caring for widows, sharing resources. They didn't need flying rigs because the message was compelling on its own. And of course, no different than white European altar art, your nativity casts white people as Middle Eastern refugees fleeing state violence. God's incarnation as a poor, brown, colonized body under Roman Empire isn't incidental. It's theologically essential. When you replace that with white actors, you're not creating reverent tradition. You're creating empirical fan fiction that strips the nativity of its political implications. You turn a story about God identifying with marginalized people into entertainment for those who can afford $20 to $60 plus processing fees. At least cathedrals were public spaces where you could be broke and walk into. Jesus said that it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. You brought the camel, you brought the spectacle, but you haven't made it easier for the rich to enter heaven. You just made it more expensive for the poor to hear about a God who chose a feeding trough over a throne. I am Connie Chen. I teach a class called Faith Deconstruction 101, Leaving the Church Without Losing Yourself. I also run a Patreon community where we are doing monthly deconstruction and reconstruction of women in the Bible. Last month was Eve, and dropping soon is a study on the Virgin Mary. The links are you know where.